Jeremy Courtney is the founder and CEO of Preemptive Love Coalition, a first in, last to leave community of peacemakers who provide frontlines relief and long-term development in Iraq, Syria, and other areas of polarizing conflict. Preemptive Love goes where no one else will go to love the people that no one else will love, providing thousands of life-saving surgeries for children. They've given out millions of hot meals even in the last year. They provide fresh water. And one of the things that I love about this ministry is that they help people get on their feet again. So those who have had businesses, they help them to rebuild their business, help them to get into work and to rebuild their lives as a result. Would you put your hands together and give a really warm Bayside Church welcome for Jeremy Courtney today? Bless you, mate. Wonderful. It's lovely to have you here. I love and we welcome Jessica as well, your better half. Isn't that right?
Indeed.
Yeah, you have to say that. I love this line here, first in, last to leave community. Tell us what that means. What does that look like for you in Preemptive Love?
Well, we didn't have much of an agenda. We didn't have much of an understanding of how to address conflict when we moved into the region. We didn't have a blueprint. We weren't following anyone else's playbook. And what we began to discover after ISIS started taking over so many villages in Iraq and then cities in Iraq in 2014 is that the big aid organizations, all the ones that you've heard about with the big names and the big budgets, all of them, to a one, were generally orientated toward not going into the conflict zone itself. So let's say this table is ground zero where people are really under siege. And not to the point of this is ISIS controlled territory and everyone's being beheaded. Not like that. Just like generally speaking, this is where the war is going on. Well, the big aid organizations would generally stay way out here and say, that's really dangerous in there. And so from this outer ring, they'd be like shouting into the war zone, hey, if y'all can make it out alive, we'll be here for you. We've set up camps, we've got water, we've got toilets, we've got food. If you can make it out, we've got millions of dollars to spend on you somewhere out here. And the good news is millions of people have made it out of these war zones in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen, in Iraq. And it's good that we have big box, big aid budget organizations out here to do this kind of stuff. But there's a whole no man's land here that wasn't being covered. And there's a conflict zone itself where hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, for various reasons, get stuck out without anyone to help them. And so we decided to just drive past all the other logos and all the other flags and all the other camps and all the other organizations and wave as we went by to try and get as close to the conflict zone as we could, because we've just found millions of people who don't have any other option. And so that's what first in means. We are often first on the scene, far closer than anyone else. When bombs are still falling 1 street away, 2 streets away, you can feel the blast of it. I've dodged shrapnel from bombs. We've got numerous occasions when snipers just a street or 2 away have been sniping, at our teams as we try to distribute aid to people who are free. So first in is about trying to get there early when people are still in dire need, before things calm down, before things are safe, because that's months too long. There's numerous times in Syria where people have been in need, some chemical attack has gone off or whatever, and we'll interface with the UN and they'll say, yeah, we're mounting a response. This is a really big deal. Things are really scary. People are in desperate need. And we'll say, great, when's the response going to land? And they'll say, probably in the next month or 2. And so you're talking about people who are being left in starvation and squalor for far too long. So first in has been about trying to just get there as fast as possible. Last to leave is about helping people turn that corner from the day that ISIS gets kicked out of their town or the day that their town gets liberated from whatever nasty force is, causing them trouble at that time. to when can they stand on their own 2 feet again, provide for their kids, provide for their family, get their kids back in school, the hospital's functioning, the water system's turned back on, the lights are back on, safety is returned, and they're caring for themselves again. The distance between first in and that scenario of flourishing communities can be shorter or longer, kind of depending on the geopolitical or local political situation of the location. So we have just made a commitment. We want to be the last to leave, or among the last to leave. We want to make long-term commitments to these friends to help them get from that pit that they find themselves in back to some level of normalcy.
Yeah, which is absolutely amazing. You're talking about being in a war zone. I don't doubt that you've maybe felt a bit scared over the time that you've been there. Can you think of a time where it was particularly difficult or particularly frightening for you and your team? And what was that like?
Yeah, I guess there's different kinds of fear. There's like a chronic fear of the unknown, where you're going in and toward an area that is known to be particularly fraught with danger and threat and risk. There are some city names that are like almost mascots for fear. You would know these names and what they stand for, what they've come to stand for in our minds because of the media we consume. Fallujah, for a while at least, was maybe one of the most notorious cities in the planet because of the beheadings and the snuff films that were created there. And it was called the bomb factory because so many suicide bombers went out from Fallujah attacking cities and bazaars and American troops and things like that. Mosul came to be known as a pretty horrific place for what went on there. Aleppo. So there are these cities that have come to be placeholders for terror, for fear, for oppression, for all the scary things. And I think when I haven't been to one of those cities in a long time, like Fallujah, I was in Fallujah, then we all got kicked out of Fallujah because ISIS took over, and it was about 3 or 4 years before I was able to go back to Fallujah. And in that intervening time, I'm following the news, I'm following the stories, and Fallujah starts taking on this ever more menacing kind of place in my mind and heart. Mosul the same. I had never been to Mosul, even though I'd been all over Iraq. I'd never been to Mosul before ISIS took over. And so as I'm approaching Mosul for the very first time, there's a fear there that's like, this is completely unknown to me. This is completely foreign to me. This is the scariest place on the planet in my mind. And it really, that kind of fear can become a thing of like, do I dare drive another block down the road? Do I dare drive another kilometer closer? And we have committed ourselves ahead of time to being the kind of community of people who wants to go 1 kilometer closer. And that's helped us to decide that, to make that deeper commitment before we get in the car. In fact, before Mosul was ever overrun by ISIS, we were making this pledge to ourselves, a pledge as a family. We even built it into the branding of the organization to say we want to be the Preemptive Love Coalition. We want to be the people who go first. We want to be people who jump forward. And so we sort of blackmailed ourselves into taking action. It's hard to brand yourself as the Preemptive Love Coalition and then sit on the sidelines. Yeah. So that's been helpful. We made a commitment as an organization. We made a commitment as a family. And personally, I made a commitment as a follower of Jesus that I'm going to try and press into the pain of the world and follow one step forward so that I can be a part of this self-sacrificing, self-giving way of love. The other kind of fear is an acute fear. It's not chronic, it's not background, it's not sort of nebulous and amorphous off in the distance. It's in the moment right now. They're coming for us. The guns are going off, the bombs are falling. I literally hear the shrapnel spinning through the air at me and trying to understand and gain perspective of which way it's coming from and can I duck in time. That sort of in the moment acute fear it's just different. I don't know what to say about it. It's just sort of like, in all those moments, in maybe most or all those moments that I've been in a more acute state, there's always been other people around. And our life we're not doing this stuff from a place of adventurism. We're doing this to serve people. And I think our others orientation has helped us keep digging into things, because our safety and our well-being is rarely at the forefront of our minds. It's mostly about how can we serve others and how can we get to help other people who have been under such oppression and suffering for so long. And I think that's helped mitigate both the chronic background fear and the acute moments of danger or fear.
Okay. It's fascinating.
No one's ever asked me that before, so I'm sorry. I'm working some of this out on the fly.
No, that's okay. Now, when we think of Iraq and Syria, we come from the perspective of what we see on our news media, and there is nothing in me personally that would want to move my wife and my kids to Iraq. Why did you? What happened? How did you end up there?
So I was very affected, and maybe even in ways I didn't understand at the time, by the terror attacks on America, September 11th, 2001. We had just gotten married. We had just graduated from college. And we had just turned 22 years old, all right in the days and weeks running up to September 11th. And America became consumed with this conversation about terrorism, about Islam, about other people out there coming to get us and attack us and hurt us and invade our shores. What does it mean to be a patriot? What does it mean to love your country? In the American system, some of that, at least parts of the American system, some of that can be very bound up and wedded with religion, with Christianity in particular. So now we're not just talking about what does it mean to be a patriot, but we're really, at least subtly and implicitly, talking about what does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to be a Christian American? And that is decidedly meant to be vis-a-vis and against what does it mean to be a Muslim. And so somehow this is all the background in ways that it's subtle and we don't even necessarily understand everything that's going on. But in the midst of that, we just raised our hand, along with many of our other friends, and said, we need to respond to this terror moment, this patriotic moment, this Christian moment that we're in. Some of our friends went off and joined the military. That was their response. I saw myself as being very different from that. My grandfather was in the military, but we don't really come from we're not a gun-waving family, gun-toting family per se. That didn't predominate our culture. So I was kind of a little bit on the outs from the military response. And we chose to join up in a more missionary response. And we headed out into the world, into the Muslim world in particular, to make disciples of Jesus. That's what we would have said, to plant churches, to do all that. That ultimately landed us in Iraq, and I think it was a combination of having spent some time. We moved to Turkey first, and things didn't go well for us in Turkey in many ways. This disciple-making thing wasn't as easy as I guess I thought it was going to be. The church planting thing wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. And ended up just screaming, crying out to God in prayer one night, why aren't you doing anything through us? Where are the churches that you promised? Where are the disciples that you promised? And in this moment of prayer, I had a profound experience. I think I heard a voice. I think I heard a response. And the response was, it's because you don't love them, Jeremy. That's why I'm not working through you. That's why there's no fruit. That's why there's nothing to show for this life that you've been living. You don't love them. You love yourself, you love arguing, you love theological correctness, you love being right, but you don't love this guy Muhammad sitting on the other side of the table from you, full stop, period. And that unlocked something in me. I actually saw myself in that prayer. I had my fists up, looking for a fight everywhere I went. And this was so true of me. Everywhere I went, every Muslim I talked to, I was looking for a fight. I would say they were stiff-necked. I would say they were hard-hearted. I would say they were unrepentant. But they were actually being very, very kind and hospitable to me. I was a guest in their country, and they did nothing but welcome me. But every point of welcome, I had my fists up looking for a fight. And so I would throw the first blow, and then we would be in a fight. And then I would blame it on them because they're Muslim. And everyone believed me. Everyone back home accepted that version of events because we were Christians and we were inherently right, and we were Americans and we were inherently right.
Yeah.
And when that word came, because you don't love them, Jeremy, I actually saw myself in my mind's eye lower my fists and open my arms and welcome. And I stood up off the ground in the real world and walked out of that place and out of that prayer a completely changed person. And I think it started unleashing something in me. What does it mean to love people? And what does it mean to love Muhammad, the guy sitting across from me at the table? Started meaning that I have to care about the things he cares about. I have to weep over the things that he weeps over. And that naturally started drawing us in further and further to things that were not strictly theological or not simply theological, or things that I didn't regard as theological. I had gone out to debate eternity and heaven and hell and these kinds of things. I had not gone out to talk about politics, to talk about foreign policy, to talk about economic and systemic injustice. I hadn't gone out to talk about spreadsheets and revenue and business models, but that's what Muhammad cared about. That's what Fatima cared about, and that's what Aisha cared about, and that's what they all care about, because that's the stuff that life is made of. And I think once my heart started opening up to a wider array of things that people care about, Iraq was the natural next step, because Iraq was so predominating conversations around the Muslim world at that time, the American invasion of Iraq, the toppling of a Muslim leader, these kinds of things that I think my consciousness and my awareness started turning more and more to that environment, and it helped draw us further down in so that we ultimately moved there.
Yeah, and you've been living there for?
Almost 12 years.
Almost 12 years in Iraq, okay. I'm interested in what you're saying about, a couple of things I want to pick up from there. First of all, the theological arguments, and it's fascinating that we never have, or very rarely have, discussions on the theology of what it means to love our neighbour as ourselves, even if they happen to be Muslim or other to us as Christian people, and also, treat others as you would have them treat you. Those sort of things. And so it sounds to me from what you're saying that you've had like a conversion experience, as it were, from your evangelical American view of Scripture and faith, and that's been converted where you are in Iraq. What's happened in you and Jessica? What challenges have you faced as a result of some of that? Because you were sent out by a church, no doubt, that have never experienced what you've experienced, so they're back home. But you guys have gone out and things have changed dramatically for you. How's that impacted on you and on your faith?
Yeah, I don't know if you said dramatically or traumatically, but both are true.
Well, probably both, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing we do together, trying to take this book that's been forged, however many centuries before us, and drag it forward into today's world. And if we're not careful as a community, I think we can get ourselves in trouble the way we handle this word, these words. I think we were sent out, we were commissioned, they laid their hands on us and blessed us and sent us out with the purest of intentions, given the fact that we're all products of our time and place. it's almost like they couldn't help and I couldn't help but be a product of where I came from and my experiences. And the church, situated as it was in the white suburbs of Texas, couldn't help without some massive intentionality but be the people they ended up being, which then affects how you read things and how you think about things. And so it was with pure intentions, there's no malice or evil in what happened, that we were commissioned and sent out into the world. The piece that I haven't yet connected for you is that what I actually think we were about in many ways, subtly, not maliciously, not consciously, but subtly, I think both the people who signed up to join the military to go get the ragheads, and some of us at least, maybe me, who signed up with the missionary movement to go convert the Muslims, I actually think we were probably drinking from the same well. We were probably both trying to destroy Islam. We were probably both trying to wipe out Muslims. One was a little more overt about doing it with weapons, and we were a little more covert about wanting to do it with words and ideas. But at the end of the day, neither one of us had much of a place in our worldview for Arabs, for Muslims, for seeing humanity and seeing them as those who are made in the image of God. And so I actually went out as a conqueror. I would have never said that. And I probably even had some people in my life who told me that. Some people who weren't from our theological stream, who weren't from our church, people that I would have called unbelievers, who challenged and questioned why we were going out to do this. But I think they were right. I think I actually did go out with a conquering spirit. I don't think that matters for everyone. I don't think that means everyone went out with a conquering spirit, but I think I went out with a conquering spirit. And when I had that prayer moment and saw myself as a fighter, that changed. I was no longer a conqueror. In that moment, instantaneously, you don't love them, Jeremy. I laid down my arms in an instant, and I stood up from that prayer and walked forward, no longer a conqueror, but in a very real sense, a peacemaker. I didn't even know what that meant yet, and I hadn't even lived it yet, but I was walking into it. Well, that was now suddenly very out of step with all the friends and family and supporters and donors and prayer warriors back home. They hadn't had that experience. They hadn't gone out and sat with Muhammad. And then soon later, they hadn't experienced the war firsthand. And they hadn't seen the effects of their foreign policy and their voting firsthand. And I don't know if that's right or wrong or if it is what it is, but it made us different. Now I had seen things that I couldn't unsee, and she'd experienced things that she couldn't unexperience. And that did have traumatic impact on us and dramatic implications for our faith, for what we believe, for how we believe. I might sum it up like this. I went out the answer man. I knew everything. I was 24 years old when we got on a plane and moved overseas. Fresh out of seminary, I'd read all the books. I sat under the greatest teachers. I'd been to all the conferences. And I knew everything I needed to know. We didn't have any kids yet. I was a great parent. And I hadn't planted any churches yet, but I was a great pastor, and so on and so forth. And that is no longer true of me. These last, what's it been since we've been doing this, 15 some years, has chipped away at my certainty. It's chipped away at my arrogance. It's chipped away at my need to have answers, quite frankly. And I have been replaced with a sense of awe and wonder and contentment to just get to be a part of the journey. Yeah. I've learned so much from my Muslim friends. It's had to cause me to question, why was I so bigoted against them in the first place? I think differences matter. There are differences between Christians and Muslims. There are differences between Sunni and Shia. There's differences between Presbyterians and Baptists. Yeah. I'm not saying differences don't matter. They matter. But how you approach those, how I wielded those differences, that's changed a lot.
It's wonderful. And it's looking past those differences too, isn't it? As you said before, it's seeing the image of God in people. So people that I talk to, like yourself, who have had the experiences that you have experienced or similar, often tell me that they now live between two worlds, and actually they don't fit anywhere. So, or if they do fit somewhere, it's probably more on the foreign soil that you find yourself rather than when you go back home amongst the people that you came from. Is that true of you? Like you're from the Bible Belt of the Deep South and all that means for you Christianly, theologically. Do you think you'll ever fit back into that world again?
Jessica and I said when we launched out to do this shortly, even when we started dabbling in it right after 2001, we always had a very keen, strong sense that we were not those kind of missionaries, not those kind of people who were going to launch out, burn the ships, and spend our lives until we were 97 over there in that part of the world. We always felt a deep, deep passion for the church back home. And we always wanted to see the church itself enlivened and invigorated. And that's not changed one bit for us over the last 17 years. We've learned a lot out there, we've experienced a lot out there, but we have always carried with us this profound sense of joy and responsibility at trying to invite the church globally and locally to take one step closer into the fray. The fray might mean moving closer to Iraq in some ways, closer to Syria in some ways, but more often than not, we're just saying, move across the street. Just move closer into the fray right on the front lines where you already live. There's a lot going on here. Wherever you are, there's a lot going on. It's never about these extreme places and the bombs and the bullets. It's just, dare we step out one more step. So, do we have a home? Do we belong? No, not in the way we once did. We've changed. It's not, in some ways, it's not anyone's fault. It's not the church's fault, though the church sent us out to change, and I don't think the church was prepared for us to change. And it's a bit ironic. It's a bit sad at times. That has been painful at times because it feels like, it's like soldiers who go off to do the bidding of their government and then get abandoned as veterans when they come home. That's wrong. Yep. That should not happen. And they just did what they were told to go do, and they incurred the cost of the war being obedient in the service of the flag and the country. I think in some ways we feel like that. We just did what we were asked to go do, and now we carry these wounds and these burdens, but you're the one who sent us out to do this, and now you're going to turn your back on us? I do think that's a real wound that we carry. And yet we're still very much committed to the church in general and wanting to stay in the conversation. We don't want to become embittered. I don't think we're embittered. And we don't want to burn bridges. We want to still have a seat at the table because what we have seen, having emerged from the particular place where we were, we've seen beautiful, amazing vistas out there as we've climbed higher on this mountain. And we just want to bring news back. The view where you are sitting right now, church back home, it's a beautiful view. I loved that view for the longest time. But you sent us out to climb a little bit higher on the mountain. We just want to bring a report back. There's even greater vistas, greater things to be seen. If you dare just pick up your tents and move a little bit higher, we can summit up there later. Dare you take that journey with us? So I think we're just calling people further up the mountain.
I love that. Let's talk about what it's like up the mountain in Iraq and Syria. What do you see currently, where you live, where you're ministering in Iraq and Syria, and what do you see for the future of those nations?
I think above all, everywhere I go, everywhere Jess goes, everywhere our team goes, we see people made in the image of God. That may sound passé, but it is a profound difference from what we saw. We had a foothill view of what God was doing in the world 17 years ago when we launched out on this. We saw people possessed by evil. We saw threat. We saw scary people coming to get us. We would sit at a cafe and hear the call to prayer go off and shudder and talk about how demonic it sounded. I don't see that anymore. I see an imam with a beard and a skull cap sitting on a carpet in the mosque, saying beautiful things, drawing upon the same wisdom and the same spiritual experience that we've just sung about and tapped into here today. I just, my orientation toward people has changed and toward their cultural expressions and their yearnings and their pains and what they're reaching for. You know, Paul comes in to an environment similarly, and he didn't see or approach people as negatively as I learned to, you know. He looked at what they were building altars to, even the unknown God, and in some ways affirms it and says, this thing that you've built an altar to, you got it right. You nailed it. There's something more out there. Yeah. You're so right to have erected a piece of worship to that thing that you felt, that thing that you sensed that was out there, that was deeper than the other gods and the other things that you knew. And he affirmed that and then tried to add more to it or name it or, you know, call them deeper in toward it. I think that's more the orientation that we've taken in the world. This thing that you're singing, this prayer that you're praying, this mosque that you've built, this church that you've built, it stands for something real and true, and it's deep and it's resonant, and I experience it all over the world in Muslim countries and Buddhist countries and Hindu places. We're all tapped into something really profound here. And I see people who are made in the image of God. And with that, I see Iraq and Syria and Libya and Yemen and Iran and North Korea as having really valuable, workable material to do something great in their communities, to do something great in the world, to become amazing, flourishing societies. If they were all pure evil and demonic, well, I would be really sad and destitute, and it would make sense maybe more why I would want to bomb them off the face of the earth. But now, having seen people made in the image of God, I'm just so filled with hope for North Korea. I'm so filled with hope for Yemen. I'm so filled with hope for Syria, because people who are tapped into that deeper well of God's love, who knows what's possible?
Yeah. Let's apply that to, as we start to wrap up, apply that to, you know, us here in the world's second most livable city. We got knocked off our perch this week. It's just to humble us for a year, and then we're going to be reinstituted, hopefully. What does that mean for us? How do we be preemptive in our love, in our daily lives, and as an expression of the love of God to our communities?
I'm always very mindful and nervous, frankly, when I have an opportunity to share with you and someone gets me down the road where I'm talking about bombs and bullets and running for our lives and this kind of stuff. Because from where I sit and what we've experienced, the way it seems to me is that your takeaway should be, wow, if it can work there in such a crazy environment like that, then surely it can work here. But I'm mindful that that's actually not the way it lands sometimes. The way it lands sometimes is actually deflating and uninspiring. Like, there's two kinds of inspiration. I don't know if this is going to make sense in this environment, but I'm a big American basketball fan. And I grew up watching the greatest basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan. I don't want to hear about it. Don't at me if you're a LeBron fan. But I grew up watching Michael Jordan, and Jordan inspired me to sit and watch more Michael Jordan. Okay? Jordan inspired me to rewind the tape and watch it over again, and rewind the tape and watch it over again. Jordan didn't go inspire me to go out onto the court and try and improve my vertical and jump higher and work out more. I didn't run faster. I didn't lift heavier. I didn't ever learn to dunk. You know, Jordan was a spectator thing for me. He amazed me, and so I watched him. Bob Dylan inspired me to pick up the guitar because he was jangly and he was ratty and he wasn't that good. And he inspired me to actually learn to play the guitar jangly and kind of ratty and nasty and start writing songs that droned on and, you know, told stories. And there's two kinds of inspiration. There's the inspiration that makes you just sit back and admire, and there's the kind of inspiration that makes you pick up the guitar and do something. We want our inspiration to be more Dylan-like or get you off the couch and go do something, but I'm mindful that sometimes it can just create the opposite effect of like, we don't live in a war zone, that's not really applicable to us, I could never do something like that. I think, therefore, I want to just demystify the idea that somehow a 30-minute talk here was easy, or that we went quickly from being really scared after September 11th to then dodging bombs and bullets in the middle of Mosul as ISIS is being driven out of town. It was one small step after another. On September 11th, that night, we gathered to pray for Osama bin Laden. That's one small step that had profound implications on the orientation of our life. I liken it to the rudder of a ship. That night, we turned our head just ever so slightly toward Muslims in a slightly more humane way than we might have otherwise turned. We still had a lot of bad stuff going on in our hearts, but we turned ever so slightly, and that rudder sent us years down the road. Now we're miles off from where we might have been otherwise. So I'd say focus on those small rudder changes. Focus on those small moves. When we were singing that song, forgive me, I forgot the lyric exactly, but fill me afresh, fill me anew, wash over me, something like that's how it landed on me. I had this image of Jessica and I just took our kids on a tour of some American national parks. And in Yellowstone National Park, there is this huge waterfall that we wanted to go see. And so we looked all day for it and tried to figure out how to get up to it. And we got to the parking lot, parked, got on foot, and started walking up toward the waterfall. And we finally made it to the viewing landing that they had created so that you could look at the waterfall. And as we rounded the corner and looked at the waterfall, it was so far away. Like we were expecting to be right there on it. Wow. But it was actually so far away that it was really disappointing. And I kind of moaned and griped, and I was like, oh, all that walking for this, it's so far away. And Jessica and our son Micah were like, yeah, that's too far away. We're going to go find it. And they turned off down this back trail and went down from the viewing site and wound around and tried to get down to the river and tried to see if they could get closer to the waterfall itself. Meanwhile, Emma and I just sat up on the viewing site and kind of griped and sang songs about how we wish the waterfall would come closer to us. And I had this image as we were singing that song that we asked to be filled anew. We asked to be filled afresh. We asked to have God's torrential love pour over us. And it's kind of like just standing on the viewing site saying, oh, if that waterfall would just move. If we stay in the same place we've always been, if we come sit in the same chairs we always sit in, going to the same job we've always had, taking our kids to the same school, I don't know if we should be that surprised that we're not getting anything fresh and new in our life. I think we actually have to take off down some uncharted trail and try to get closer to the waterfall. Right. If you want a fresh filling, you might have to go to where the filling's happening. Yeah. When I was at Bayside Baptist this morning at about 6 a.m. praying for our time together, I had this other image of going to a doctor's office. And And I went to the doctor's office and I filled out my name on the slip, and I sat in the waiting room with a bunch of you, and we were just kind of reading the literature that they had out on the table. And what are you in for? Oh, I got back pain. Yeah, you? Oh, my eyes aren't seeing well. And we all just commiserated, talking about how sick and tired we are of being sick and tired. And then the doctor comes to the door and reads out my name and says, Jeremy Courtney, come on back. And I froze. It's like, no, I think I'm good. I think I'll just stay here in the waiting room. And the doctor's like, well, this is the waiting room. This isn't where the thing actually happens. This is just the place where you sign in. It's just the place where you sign up. This is just the place where you read the literature that the pharma companies dropped off. The thing is happening back here. You got to come with me. And I don't know, it just landed on me this morning, like, I wonder at times if this is just this literal place that we're in right now, this room, if it's just meant to be the waiting room. And the doctor's actually calling us back. There's healing. There's better diagnostics, better analysis of our problems than we've ever had before. And there's some operating room back here, and there's some medicine to be distributed back here, but we have to leave the waiting room. The action is out there somewhere. And if we're not taking that one step out from the thing that we've always known and the way we've always done it, I don't think we're going to get a fresh filling. I don't think we're going to get drenched in something new. I don't know if we're going to get that healing that we sing about in the waiting room when we come here.
So it's about being out and about with people. We talk about this all the time at Bayside, that this is actually like a mobile Christian recharging unit. And then once we're filled and recharged, then we go out and share that love and grace with our community. Try and see people, as you said, made in the image of God, people that God loves as much as He loves us, that we are not holier than thou just because we happen to be Christians, but that God loves everyone and Jesus died and rose again for everyone. So it's how do we bring heaven to earth in our daily lives. I mean, that's what you're doing in Iraq. We just happen to be doing it in a different location, but same MO, which is great. Now, I asked, there's only so much you can get into 30 minutes, and so I asked different questions last night, by and large, to what I asked this morning. So tomorrow we're going to upload audio and video of last night and this morning. So I'm going to encourage Saturday night's congregation to watch this morning, and I encourage you to watch last night. But it's been wonderful to have you here. We've already invited Jeremy and Jessica to come back and to have a few days so they can enjoy some of Melbourne, and maybe in a warmer time of year. Yeah.
We accept.
Okay, that's great. Mind you, it's 44 degrees in Baghdad at the moment, so I'd prefer this personally. But this afternoon, these guys fly up to Brisbane. So I'm your weatherman, okay? So it's going to be fine and mild with a top of 21 degrees in Brisbane today. It's going to be beautiful, and you will enjoy. Would you put your hands together for Jeremy and Jessica Courtney? God bless you guys.